So am I the only person that actually headbanged along to Immigrant Song when I first came on this film? I'm pretty sure I wasn't. Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to the latest episode of First Impressions. On today's episode, Chris Hemsworth's Thor must save Asgard from the goddess of death as she attempts to bring about Ragnarok. The plot of the movie is that Thor, played once again by Chris Hemsworth, encounters a new enemy in the form of Hela, the goddess of death, played by Cate Blanchett. And in the ensuing showdown, Thor's mighty hammer Mjolnir is smashed into a million pieces by Hela, and he is banished to the planet of Sakaar, where he's captured and forced to do battle in a gladiator arena by Jeff Goldblum's the Grandmaster to earn his freedom. So now he must defeat his own friend, the Hulk, played by Mark Ruffalo, if he wants to get back to Asgard and save it from total destruction. So the Marvel Cinematic Universe has easily become one of the biggest franchises in recent years, with films featuring Captain America, Iron Man and Spider-Man under its belt. Hell, even some of its more out there niche properties like Ant-Man, Doctor Strange and Guardians of the Galaxy have all made for very solid films. But for some reason, Thor's always had a bit of a hard time in the MCU. I enjoyed the first Thor movie for what it was, but I didn't think it was an instant classic. And Thor the Dark World is probably my least favourite MCU film to date. Yes, even more so than Iron Man 2. All of the MCU's flaws are on full display in that film. Bland music, weak villain, by-the-numbers directing, a storyline that's really forgettable. Don't get me wrong, it's not a terrible film by any means, it's just very forgettable. That being said, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the Thor films, I was actually pretty excited for Ragnarok. I've always really liked Chris Hemsworth as Thor, and of course Tom Hiddleston is awesome as Loki, there's no denying that. And this movie also has a terrific cast. You have Mark Ruffalo once again returning to the role of Hulk, you have Cate Blanchett, Karl Urban and Jeff Goldblum, you also have Anthony Hopkins and Idris Elba returning from previous movies, and you have a pretty unusual choice for director in the form of Taika Waititi, a New Zealand filmmaker largely known for his quirky and eccentric comedies like Hunt for the Wilder People and What We Do in the Shadows. And the trailers were quite frankly brilliant, visually stunning with excellent music and great humour. But does Thor Ragnarok actually live up to all the hype surrounding it? Well... yes! Yeah, that pretty much covers it. Thor Ragnarok is another solid entry in the MCU that easily beats its predecessors to become the best in its trilogy, even if that's not saying a whole lot. For one, this movie looks absolutely amazing. Visually, it's probably one of Marvel's most stunning movies, easily rivaling Doctor Strange or any of the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. The production design and cinematography in this movie are fantastic. The shots and shot compositions really do look impressive, and there's some really psychedelic and trippy visuals that are very reminiscent of comic books from the 60s and 70s. It's very much inspired by the work of Jack Kirby. It wears those influences loud and proud. It's almost like a comic book movie come to life, a very vibrant, colourful and very psychedelic comic book. And Waititi's directing is a major highlight of this film. That was one of the main reasons I was excited to see this film, but at the same time it was also one of the reasons I was kind of a little worried about the film as well, because even though I do really love a lot of the MCU films, Marvel's history with directors is a little bit spotty. The MCU is a very producer-driven franchise, but that's understandable because in order for this big franchise with multiple films coming out every year to work, you need a good producer who can actually oversee the entire process and make sure that there's a sense of consistency between each film. So while we get films that are entertaining in their own right, and sometimes directors like Joss Whedon or James Gunn or Shane Black are still able to make very unique and fun films that are still very much their own, a lot of the time the directing can feel very anonymous. Thor the Dark World was a major casualty of this, and even some of my favourite MCU films can sometimes suffer from this too. That's not the case here. Waititi's voice and personality can be felt very much throughout the entirety of the film. He gives the movie a very retro feel. It's very tongue-in-cheek, it's very quirky, it's almost like an indie comedy in a lot of ways. It's like Marvel's attempt at making Flash Gordon mixed with Big Trouble in Little China. And this is definitely not a film that takes itself seriously. There are a lot of jokes throughout, there's a lot of gags and humour, and admittedly it did take me a wee bit of time to settle into its groove, but once I did settle into its groove, I really did. There's some great one-liners and some really humorous dialogue, even if it does sometimes come at the cost of the drama in places, and the entire cast is all top-notch. Chris Hemsworth is still as likeable and as charismatic as ever as Thor, and I really liked how they challenged the character in this film. Even though he is a powerful god, he can still be vulnerable, and they still managed to put him in a very tight spot in this film. His back is very much up against the wall. He's forced to rely on his own strengths and his own instincts and his own ingenuity, as opposed to his hammer. And what I really like about a lot of the MCU films is that you see many of the characters develop over each film. You see characters like Iron Man and Captain America develop, and that is seen in the character of Thor. He went from being this very careless, arrogant and cocky warrior in the first movie to being this very noble and powerful hero with the potential to lead Asgard in a time of crisis, which is something that he has to do in this film. Tom Hiddleston is once again fantastic as Loki, and there's a bit of an interesting dynamic between them. Thor's kind of indifferent to his brother this time around. He doesn't really love or hate him. And there's a very amusing gag involving him throwing objects at Loki because they think it's just a holographic projection of him. And both Hemsworth and Hiddleston have great chemistry with each other throughout the film. But Hemsworth has even better chemistry with Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk. The two just work off against each other brilliantly. There's a really great dynamic between them whenever Ruffalo is the Hulk, who just comes across as a big toddler in this film. It's really funny, and I really like the way that Hulk's presented in this film. Even though he's this very big, powerful monster, he's very much like a child in this film. He's very much growing and developing now that he's spent all this time as the Hulk. Again, it's another good indication as to how the MCU has developed these characters throughout these films. And this film has a great supporting cast. Tessa Thompson's very entertaining as Valkyrie, who's definitely one of the main highlights of the movie, in a movie full of major highlights. Karl Urban also has a few entertaining scenes as a somewhat dim-witted Scourge, the gatekeeper who's manipulated into helping Hellish wreaks havoc on Asgard. Even Taika Waititi shows up as Korg, who's this big rock monster that serves as another gladiator in the Grandmaster's arena, and he wants to start a revolution but he can't get any support to actually do it. Waititi is great as Korg. You can tell he's having a lot of fun on the parts. I just love his personality and demeanour. He's so big and he's such a brute. And he's very matter-of-fact and blunt about things, but he's very kind and well-meaning. He's very charming and funny. Like, he has some of the movie's best lines. The only real downfall is that some of the characters do feel kind of sidelined because there's a lot of characters to keep track of in this film. The likes of Anthony Hopkins' Odin and the Warrior Three, who are Thor's warrior friends, do not get much to say or do in this film. And if you were disappointed that the warrior friends didn't have much to do in the previous Thor films, you're going to be even more disappointed because they get barely anything to do here. Villains are also a lot of fun too. Marvel movies tend to struggle quite a lot with their villains. There are some exceptions like Loki or Ultron, but most of them are just kind of forgettable. Not terrible, but nothing really that great either, with Malekith from Thor the Dark World easily being my least favourite MCU villain to date. But some of the more recent MCU films have made a conscious effort to try and rectify this, and Cate Blanchett's Hela is a pretty solid villain overall. She's funny, she's intimidating, she's a real badass, and you can tell that Blanchett is really enjoying herself in the role. She's having a lot of fun in the parts. And it's Blanchett's sheer force of personality that does make up for how underwritten Hela can be as a villain. There are attempts to try and flesh her out, but they don't really add much to the character. She's not a great villain in the same way that Loki is, but she's not a bland and forgettable villain like Malekith is. She falls somewhere in the middle. But out of all the characters in this film, easily the biggest standout is Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster. He is just incredible, playing this very charismatic hedonist. He's basically like a Roman emperor, sitting over and presiding over these gladiator arena battles. Goldblum just has this real charm and he's a great comedic timing, especially in his scenes with Thor and Loki. And what's interesting about the Grandmaster is that even though he is an antagonistic figure, and he is hindering Thor's attempts to get back to Asgard, he's not an inherently malevolent figure. He's just somebody who wants to be entertained, and whenever he comes across Thor and pits him against the Hulk, he's definitely got himself a good match on his hands. Just not in the way that he expected. So after all the gushing and fanboying out about Thor Ragnarok and how great it is, let's talk about some of the aspects I didn't like so much about it. First off, remember whenever I said earlier that this movie's humour did take me a while to get into? Yeah, that's me saying that some of the humour didn't exactly work very well. There's a few gags that just didn't really land or were quite predictable or just went on too long, and those jokes mostly do occur in the first half of the film. As far as Marvel movies go with their humour, I wouldn't quite call it the most consistently funny. I still think the first Avengers and the first Guardians of the Galaxy one up it in that area, but it's nowhere near as forced as some of the humour was in Doctor Strange or Thor the Dark World. Speaking of the humour, I think some people might have an issue with the tone of this film. You would think with a movie like Thor Ragnarok it would be a lot darker, as it does revolve around the destruction of Asgard and the end of all things, hence the name Ragnarok. Something along the lines of Captain America the Winter Soldier or Civil War. Yet the movie doesn't take itself all that seriously. Those movies did have humour in them, but they were mostly quite serious in comparison. By contrast, Thor Ragnarok doesn't take itself seriously at all. and I can understand if some people maybe find that a bit hard to swallow, if I'm being honest. It didn't bother me that much because the movie is so entertaining that I can actually kind of overlook that. But I can see why some people might be a little put off with the approach to the film, especially considering there's a lot of dramatic moments that are supposed to be very serious and emotional. Then somebody will say something that's meant to be a joke and a lot of the drama will just kind of evaporate from the sequence. But aside from that, I quite enjoyed Thor Ragnarok. I thought it was a very fun, very entertaining movie with some good characters, excellent performances, stunning visuals, confident and witty directing, and it's another solid addition to the MCU that helps continue their winning streak. Yeah, its humour doesn't always land, and I can understand if some people are put off by the very light-hearted approach to the material. If you're more into gritty, grounded, and serious comic book movies, you'll probably not be interested in seeing this. But if you are into comic book movies that are more colourful, more vibrant, and really do embrace the more quirkier aspects of the source material and don't try to downplay it, I think you'll be in for a real treat with this. On a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being absolute irredeemable shit, and 10 being an absolute masterpiece, I'm gonna give Thor Ragnarok an 8 out of 10. I personally consider it one of the more middling MCU films. If I were ranking it on the MCU scale, I'd probably put it somewhere between Iron Man 3 and Avengers Age of Ultron. If you're a big Marvel fan, I'd definitely recommend seeing it if you haven't yet. So Thor Ragnarok, have you seen it yet? If so, what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back soon with reviews for Murder on the Orient Express, Paddington 2, Justice League, among several others. But in the meantime, feel free to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. If there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, let me know. I can also be found via Twitter, Facebook, email, and Instagram. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.